Two of the most confusing metrics on YouTube are CTR and AVD. And in this video, I'm going to break down the truth behind these metrics, why they're not as good as people make them seem, and what we can do about it. So buckle up and let's get started. So as this first part of the video, I want to take a moment to create a common understanding about these two metrics, because we're going to need this understanding before we go into the complexer parts of this video. The first metric that we have is CTR. CTR stands for click-through rate, and this is where we measure how clickable our video is to an audience that YouTube serves it to. If YouTube serves our video to about 100 people, and 10 of those people click on our video, we have a CTR of 10%. If this increases to 15 people clicking out of 100, we get a CTR of 15%. So this is a metric that measures clickability, and on the surface it looks like when we increase it, that's a good thing. Later on you see why it's not. The second metric is AVD, average view duration. This is where we look at how long people watch the video. So if we have a 10-minute video and people watch for about 5 minutes, we have an AVD of 5 minutes. If this viewer watches longer, then we may have 7 out of 10 minutes, which gives us an AVD of 7 minutes. So instead of clickability, now we're kind of measuring watchability. One extra thing I want to add here is that sometimes people don't use AVD, instead they use APV, which is their retention rates. This is where we take the AVD, such as 5 minutes out of the 10 minutes, and we simply turn it into a percentage, so 50% of our entire video. So let's now get to the good part of this. Let's talk about success metrics. Success metrics are the eventual goal of our video. And I'm saying this because most creators are actually not looking to increase CTR or AVD. They're looking to increase views. So if an increase in CTR leads to an increase in views, that's a good thing. If an increase in AVD leads to an increase in views, that's a good thing. Now what's not a good thing is that seeing those CTR and AVD metrics increase, but views not going up. And this is exactly the problem. One of the most important concepts to understand is correlations. And correlation is a measurement where we look at how one metric relates to the other, to look at the relationship between those two metrics. So to know whether metrics such as CTR and AVD are good, what we're actually needing to do here is check what kind of relationship do those metrics have with our success metric, in our case views. So we're going to look whether an increase in CTR actually leads to an increase in viewership. The same counts for AVD. And what we will notice is that on most channels this isn't true. Let me show this on a chart. So if we take 10 videos and we see that the CTR is 8%, 9%, 10%, 11%, we're normally expecting a similar amount of growth within each video. So for example, for the 8% CTR, we're expecting 800,000 views, 9% CTR, we're expecting 900,000 views, 1 million, 1.1, and so on. Now in this case, we have a perfect correlation. Metric A, which is CTR, goes up, metric B goes up. So our goal can be to increase CTR, because we know that views will follow. However, what we can see is that if we stick to the views, those CTRs actually start changing their direction. So it becomes fairly unpredictable. Sometimes we'll have a higher CTR and the views are low. And then we have lower CTR, but the views are high. As a little intermezzo, I invite you all to pick all your videos and look at CTR, look at AVD, and work those charts in and see if there's a correlation yourself. Because in the end, I can say all this kind of stuff, but it's important what works for your data. So where am I trying to go with all of this? Well, I'm going exactly where you don't want me to go. And that is that these CTR and AVD metrics are actually useless. The reason why all of this happens, and this is unfortunate, is because of something called survivor bias. So let me explain all of this through an example. A little side note, we're going to take CTR to set the example, but the same logic will apply for AVD. Picture two groups of 1 million people each. People who like our content most of the times are in group A, and people who sometimes like our content, but most of the times they don't, are in group B. After you post your first video, YouTube knows that group A likes most of what you post. So they'll show your video to everybody in group A. From group A, 10% of people click on your video. This brings us to a CTR of 10%. Now, YouTube isn't always sure about group B, so it will only test the video against a small sample of this group. So let's say it tests against 50,000 people from group B. They're our test group. After a first round of feedback from this group, it's very clear that only 1% of this test group likes to see our video. This means that if we look at an overall group B CTR, we have 1%. Now YouTube doesn't show this to the other 950,000 people because it just didn't do well enough. so we can cross them out. So what happened here is that we will get 1,050,000 impressions that resulted into 100,500 views. However, YouTube does not report both of these CTRs. What it instead does is it gives us an average CTR. So if we calculate this one, this gives us a CTR of 9.57%. So if we look at this one, it's 100,500 views for a 9.57 CTR. Pretty decent. The same process happens for our second video. Everybody gets their content, and the CTR from Group A is again 10%. However, in Group B, we now notice that it's not just 1% of people being interested, it actually 7% on average clicks on our video. YouTube is like, hey, this is a great sign, and now sends our video to the entirety of Group B. Now, compared to the first video, we actually have more impressions because our video was shown to more people. We in total have 2 million impressions. And if we calculate how many views we get from this one, we get 170,000 views, which is more than the 100,500 views from our video A. Our views have gone up by more than 70%. But how about the CTR? Well, actually, if we calculate this one, YouTube takes an average of the CTRs and the amount of people, and we get to a CTR of 8.5%. So what we can see here is that even though our video is more successful, our CTR goes down. So in this example, you saw that YouTube selected who to show our video to, and that influenced the CTR. Now, unfortunately, YouTube isn't going to test it like this. It's a lot more complex system. YouTube almost knows for every single person what they would be interested in, what not, or anything like that. So the problem that you have here is that on any given day, YouTube is serving our content to both an audience that might be interested as well as an audience that is very interested in our content. And this just creates a metric that accurately represents what happened, but it didn't take into consideration the selection process and the testing process of our video. And because of this, the data becomes skewed and unreliable because we have no insights in who YouTube suggests us to. Now the question is this a YouTube problem? No, this is not a YouTube problem, because YouTube is just doing their job and reporting the data that they have on the audience that they found for us. If we want accurate data, we actually need data over everybody. So we want to know those who didn't click on our videos, who would have normally been served our content. We want their data. Unfortunately, the algorithm is just too complex for that. So where does this all bring us? Well, at first, unfortunately, it doesn't bring us very far. It makes CTR and AVD and APV very useless metrics. Since they don't accurately represent what is going on, they fluctuate all over the time, and there's no relationship or correlation with their success metric. They're pretty useless. Now, even when we look at traffic sources, we can actually find similar patterns. It's all random and there's very little direction. And even if we look at new and returning viewership, we will still find similar issues. But there is a solution, because we don't want to rely on randomness to make a judgment, but there is still a metric that accurately represents how well we did. Unfortunately, it doesn't break down the clickability or the watchability of our video, but it does give you good information. And in fact, actually, we can do more things than just read this metric. And this metric is, guess what? Views. But we can take this a step further, because there's not just views. We can also check within a certain time frame. We know that first our own audience watches in the first days, and then it goes to a wider audience. So we can see how videos evolve in certain time frames. So that's why you have views within certain time frames or within a certain time frame. And lastly, and this is my most favorite, and this is what this channel is really gonna be about, it is the retention charts. Because guess what? Maybe the numbers in the retention charts are pretty bad, right? Like 50% doesn't mean shit. But what does mean something is when the chart goes down, bad. When the chart stays even, good. And that's how we get learnings from our video. So yeah, this is not a video that is going to create the most amazing solution for you, but this is what I'm gonna tell you. If you're still not convinced and you're still using CTR AVD after this video, you are hurting yourself. Because you could believe you're doing something well, but in reality, if we look at the chart, maybe you were reading a data point, like 15% CTR, but that video didn't perform exceptional. It was an average video. And now you're taking a learning from that video and applying this as God's work. But unfortunately, you're misled by the data. And that's not your fault. Data is complicated. But hopefully this video gives you some information that might not be encouraging, but at least you know the truth. And before I forget, make sure to subscribe, or more importantly, share this with those who use these metrics.